Good afternoon, everybody. It's Soul Raptor Jesus, your favorite host of the RPG Workshop. In fact, I'm your only host, so I guess you're stuck with me, fellas. And today on the workshop, we're going to talk about combat encounters in Gamma World, First Edition. So the RPG I've been playing with some success and failure, so I've had to adapt my playstyle here and there as a dungeon master, or referee as they call it in the book. But it's okay, and I like to try to follow the rules as much as I can. So we'll start with encounters, and encounters happen in one of two ways. If you're in the what I call the world map, where you're using route movement, you're gonna want to roll an encounter 1 to 3 times a day if you're in the wilderness, or 1 time a day if you're like in settlements and such, because you still should have encounters in settlements, but they're usually non-combat related. Well, they should be. Any encounter can actually be resolved by actually talking, believe it or not. I love the reaction table in D&D and in Gamma World especially, because you roll your reaction initially, and depending on how the characters react to this initial encounter based on the reaction you roll, you can modify this by +2 or -2, depending if they're offering something. You always want them to use some sort of resource like their money or artifacts, especially artifacts. A lot of Gamma World creatures want artifacts. Then, based on how badly this interaction goes, you might have to initiate combat. And combat is actually really interesting. A round in Gamma represents 10 seconds, but you still want to roll surprise. And depending on situations, and this should also be done as well as the reaction rolls, they might have surprise on you. And that's either a 1 or 2 on a d6, and both sides roll a d6. And if they get a 1 or 2, they're surprised, which is pretty funny if they're both surprised. But what's interesting is, say, even a violent or friendly reaction, if the enemy has surprise, they might just watch you from hiding. So that can be some very interesting encounters, but you should only stalk them for a little bit, and then when the next encounter happens, you just initiate that encounter, I think, in my opinion. Some wonky things can happen, so really the reaction roll is just a guideline.
Today, our guns thunder their
Now, there's actually 2 different kinds of combat in Gamma World. There's physical combat, which is your normal fisticuffs and using weapons, getting shot with guns and such, which may not be that normal, depending how your D&D games have gone. But there's also mental combat, because there's psychic powers in this system, and any of the mental mutations, unless they really say otherwise or it's really apparent it's a passive ability, that's a mental attack on an enemy, which it's a very interesting system. So first we'll do physical combat. Now, physical combat, to those used to old school D&D, is actually pretty simple, but I really like this system because it provides 2 tables, basically 2 THAC0 tables. One is by the attacker's weapon class, so depending on what kind of weapon you're using, it has a different class. Like class 1 is like clubs and hammers, maces and spears, those types of things, and then it goes all the way to like artifacts. Like class 10 is pistols, but right below that 9 is like essentially arrows and crossbow bolts, slings. So it goes through like all of the various weapons, and it has a class from 1 to 16, from clubs all the way to fusion rifles and micro missiles. Class is important. It will come important later, and I'll explain that. And so, say you're using a club, and your opponent has just a shield. That would be armor class 9. So, class 1 against armor class 9, they're going to need a 10 or better to hit according to the table. Pretty simple. The next physical attack table is if you're attacking monsters that don't have weapons, so they're not going to actually have a class. But so what you do is, instead of weapon class, you look at attacking monsters hit dice. And then you compare that to the armor class, and then the same if like you have 2 or 3 hit die creatures attacking someone with a shield, you need to turn it better. And the mental combat actually works pretty much the same, but you're actually going to need to roll the stats for each of these creatures. It's not something they tell you in the book, but it references stats quite often. So you kind of need to treat each creature as its own individual character, which brings some interesting connotations. What happens to the monster after it wins? Does it get the experience for the character? I always lead to weird questions like this myself. So the physical attack matrix is the same, but you're actually comparing the mental strength of the attacker and defender. So if they both have 10, you're actually going to need to roll a 10 or better in order to hit them with a mental attack. Pretty simple. Some people find tables really annoying, but I find there's just there's a rhyme and reason to it. Now, weapon class is also important because there's fatigue in Gamma World, and I really like the fatigue system. So going back, if you're using a club, your fatigue rating is 15. And so what that means on the 15th round of combat, which usually I'm going to tell you, like, most combat doesn't last more than 10 rounds. So this is a really epic battle if it's 15 rounds. But if you're using a club for 15 rounds, on the 15th round, your weapon class goes down by 1. So that basically means you can't use the club. You have to rest. And then on the 16th, it goes down by 2, and so on and so forth. The best weapon to actually use if you're going to be using it is, the club is actually pretty good. 15 rounds is pretty good, but something like, say you're using a polearm, that has a fatigue of 12. And a two-handed sword, that has a fatigue of 11, which is the worst, but it also does pretty good damage. So it's a very interesting combat system in my opinion. And hit dice is also very interesting. So you notice in my character creation video, your hit dice is actually related to your constitution. So whatever your constitution is, you're rolling that many d6 for your hit points. So creatures are sort of oddly represented, in my opinion, because they should have all the stats written up, but I don't know, I guess, that's kind of annoying, and maybe you don't want to have like a static number for that because it could change. Not all arcs are the same. Gotta have some genetic diversity among all the species that are represented. Which is funny, there is no human stat entry, but then you should already know what a human is. It's actually the easiest to set up, but it does say in the encounter table, which is where all the monsters are, it says it, and I missed it the first time we were playing, but I caught it the second. But tribesmen will be like wandering humans or humanoids, and there will be 1 to 100 appearing, which is pretty scary. And there's also a Cryptic Alliance entry, which is save my party more often than not, because they're all part of a single Cryptic Alliance. So I hope this was useful to you guys, and I probably missed some stuff. Hit me down in the comments if you think I missed anything. So I hope you guys are enjoying it, you like the video, and share the video for the algorithm gods. I guess that's the rest of the video, fellas. If you have any questions, please comment down below. I hope you liked my video. If you want to see more of this stuff, please subscribe. I hope you guys have a good game next time you play, and keep your shield arm strong, alright?